Deputy Public Defender Philip Dube. Philip, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on this Friday. Always great to see you, sir.
Hey, Michael.
All right. First and foremost, we send all our condolences to anyone involved in this case. The victim, Alec Baldwin. I mean, everyone, as a friend said, everyone's probably a victim in this case. But, when I think about it, I'm saying, all the incredible things that I see in movies, Philip, you can send folks to the moon. For God's sakes, we sent William Shatner to the moon. We sent him out to space, and we can't find a prop gun that doesn't put people's lives in danger? I mean, it's just nuts.
I don't know if it's that they can't find a prop gun or they didn't load it with a dummy. I think what needs to be vetted is whether or not there was in fact a blank or live ammo or a dummy in the gun. Because at the end of the day, Alec Baldwin is not, a cowboy, so to speak. He is not trained on how to use guns and firearms, to my knowledge. It's almost as if somebody handed a gun with a live round to a small child, and they didn't know what they were doing with it. They perceived it to be a toy, and then before you know it, it is discharged and someone is hurt. I do predict that criminal charges will be flowing from this. It's not going to just go away. You have somebody who has died, somebody who is injured. At a minimum, this looks like an involuntary manslaughter. You have somebody performing a non-felonious act and possibly a lawful act, but that results in death. It's a form of negligence. Somebody should know that if you are going to put a blank or a live round and hand it to someone who is not conversant in firearms, that you need to tell them, or at least do a test fire so that you don't just go around shooting people when you're on set. Otherwise, look at this. Now, I will say this, it's not unprecedented, Michael. Do you remember in 1982 when they did the Twilight Zone film with Vic Morrow? 5 people were charged. It was a helicopter crash that ended up killing people, and they were all acquitted.
Yes, and children died in that accident, and that's why I think that was John Landis, actually. He was the guy that also did Trading Places. He did Blues Brothers, and he was charged. And that was a fiery case, Philip. That case took months, I think 3 or 4 months to try. I think it was 10 months to try? Okay, there you go. There you go. But in that 10 months, there were like 93 days of trial is what I have down here. But it took 9 days of deliberations for him to finally get acquitted. So again, my question for you is, now he was the director. Alec Baldwin is the director. So if there was some form of criminal negligence, might not he be the one to be charged in this case?
A lot of it depends on what his scienter is, what his knowledge was for viewers. In other words, if he truly has a prop master, people who are coordinating all the instrumentalities to be used during the film, and he is trusting his staff to hand him what appears to otherwise be a replica or a toy, or perhaps a gun loaded with a dummy. How is he supposed to know? He's a director, for God's sake. He's an actor. He's a performer. He's an artist. He's not a gunsmith. So I don't know. I think that is a stretch, because I think we can all agree he never certainly intended to hurt anybody. I don't think anybody for one moment suspects that.
Yeah, and I misspoke. He wasn't a director. He was a producer on the film, someone who helped get the money together. So that was my mistake. But I don't think it changes anything in terms of when you look at some of these film sets, and you heard that there was acrimony on the set, issues with too long hours. I think those types of things can play into whether, of course, criminal charges are brought, but also a civil suit, a wrongful death suit, for instance, when you're talking about working too long hours. And also there are strict things in place as a result of that John Landis case, where they have safety measures for these types of things. People are supposed to be certain distance away whenever you have these types of props, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on what this investigation reveals, you could certainly expect to see a wrongful death suit.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, people work long hours. Look at doctors who work in the ER. They do these, 48-hour rotations. Look at paramedics, EMTs, and quite frankly, look at lawyers who are engaged in trial. They put in long hours, especially the private attorneys who have to bill long hours. Does that mean if you're working long hours that you should foresee a homicide? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. There's always acrimony in the workplace, but I don't think people would ever anticipate that there would be carnage and mayhem as a result of it. It's inherently adversarial in the workplace. For the most part, people don't want to be in the workplace other than the fact that they make a living. So I don't know. I take exception with that. I just think that this was a horrible accident. Now, on the other hand, if they do have evidence that there were people who conspired to do this and set up Alec Baldwin, and I'm not suggesting there's evidence to suggest that, heads are going to roll for that. They will roll because that is a conspiracy. And I believe for that type of crime in the state of New Mexico, that could carry several years in prison. I think up to 18 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right about that. And what's interesting, in John Landis's case, you mentioned the fact that this would not be foreseeable when you are trying a criminal case on involuntary manslaughter, criminal negligence. Part of what you're going to have to show as a prosecutor bringing that case is the foreseeability of it. And one of the things they argued, the defense on John Landis's behalf, was that it wasn't foreseeable. So I'd imagine, sounds like you think that could also aid, if in fact there are any criminal charges coming out of this, that would probably be the direction they would go.
Right. I mean, if this were a movie that was about, the life and times of somebody who owned a target shooting ranch, then yeah, maybe. But I don't think that this is a situation. This is clearly something that wasn't really focusing so much on firearms and guns and, the inner workings of them and how they function. It's just a tragic accident is what it sounds like. And by the way, Michael, just so viewers know, and I'm sure a lot of them do know, blanks are dangerous. Mm-hmm. Just because you load a gun with a blank does not mean somebody cannot get injured. The only difference is you're not going to get hit by a projectile if something flies off and ricochets. You'll get hit by plugs and various debris that are inside the barrel. So you still can get hurt. The best way to go is with a dummy because there is no muzzle or flash and certainly no projectile.
Yeah, and that brings to mind, I don't know if folks remember, I believe it was back in the early 90s, an actor named John Eric Hexum. He was messing around with a prop gun, and actually he was doing a Russian roulette scene. That's where you put the gun, you spin the barrel, put it to your head. We've seen it in movies like The Deer Hunter. And he pulled the trigger, and it was actually a dummy, but a piece of the metal got lodged in his head. He went through hours and hours of surgery, but ended up dying as well. So you're exactly right. No matter how you put this stuff together, there is risk. So my question for you is, oftentimes when you sign these contracts, you go on these sets, you're assuming a certain amount of risk just by being on the set, by taking part in a movie. How do you think that plays into things?
Oh, listen, there is risk, but there are also risks that are outside that assumption of the risk. First of all, when somebody says that you're going to be handed a prop, you would assume that at worst it's a cap gun, a starter pistol, or maybe you get a burst of air coming out of the barrel. There should not be that type of deadly debris coming through the barrel. If there is, I don't think you assume that risk because I don't believe that actors ever want to play Russian roulette merely because they're making a movie with a prop gun.
Yeah, and maybe you can even go after, in a civil suit, the prop gun manufacturer. Because as I said earlier, we can send William Shatner to space and we can't make a prop gun that's safe for everybody. It doesn't make sense to me. All right, Philip Dube, stand by. It is time for us to take a break. Still ahead, the first week of jury selection in the trial.